listening to and watching I Love Melville.live. This is the weekly Melville Residents Association show. My name is Johan Prince. My guest this evening, Matthew Lewis. Matthew, welcome back.
Thank you.
You have returned to the province. I'm happy that you've come back.
Me too.
Wasn't a one-way trip.
It was touch and go for a second. I was getting worried about what Cyril was going to say on Thursday. I must admit.
Oh, because you weren't here.
I
and
was.
If there was going to be a lockdown, you'd be stuck in a very different province.
Exactly.
Considering walking back. Well, I'm glad you didn't have to walk back. Tonight is the last show of this year. We'll be playing some Christmas music as we go out, just because I'm still slightly lacking the festive season spirit. So
I don't think you're alone.
I haven't been shopping for various obvious reasons, most of them pecuniary, and so I haven't had an opportunity to hear any Christmas carols, which is normally the thing that sort of slowly gets me into the Christmas spirit. So maybe we'll contribute to that process now. Behind the buttons, and he just, I think, pressed the wrong button this evening, is Matthew Betta. So Matthew will be making a selection of Christmas cheer song with which to take us out at 9. But between now and 9, we'll be talking about improvement and beautification. And that sort of works in a sense, because Christmas, the festive season, is all about just exhaling and then imagining a better world than the one we're currently living in. That's the thing that gives us hope. The other thing that gave us hope is there was a consultation meeting last week about the Melville and Auckland Park Improvement Project. I just want to give it its proper long name, the Melville Auckland Park Public Environment Upgrade Project. The meeting was held just a few meters from where we're sitting now. Beautiful pictures were shown. You're going to give us a little bit of feedback on that meeting, what the project is, what the concerns are, what the process is, and how people, residents specifically, can participate in that process. Then you're going to share with us some really interesting data from the Melville Citizens Survey you conducted. Does that have a proper long name?
No, it has a pithy one, though. I
Right.
hope it's called Getting to Know You.
Oh, right.
So that was the survey that we sent out about a month ago now, and we've had our responses. It's open for a little bit longer, so if people out there haven't filled the survey out yet, please do so. It gives us a lot of good data for where we should be focusing all of our efforts for the next year.
Right. And if people want to participate, where do they get this thing? Where do
they can go to ilovemelville.co.za, and the survey link is up there, as it is on the M.R.A website as well.
Okay, cool. So if you're listening, if you're watching, if you want to give us your views, please do that. It's all about resource allocation, right? What do we prioritize?
Resource allocation and focus, really. What is important to the residents of Melville, which is really what we're all about. So
right, and then we'll have a look at whether what the residents are saying is important to them and what the improvement project focuses on, whether those two things match. I suspect there will be a slight overlap. Maybe not 100% overlap, but there'll be a slight overlap.
There is a Venn diagram there that exists, I would say.
We'll talk about Venn diagrams a little bit later. And then we're going to talk about your general portfolio, which is beautification and community development in any event.
Yes.
And how this fits into that broader rubric. And then we'll put you on the spot a little bit. The failures of the year from the M.R.A's perspective, the successes, and what are the priorities for next year. And again, as always, how can people get involved and what is it that you need? So that's the agenda for this evening, that and the Christmas cheer music. So let's start with the Melville Auckland Park Public Environment Upgrade Project. How should we be thinking about this? Well, I suppose the first thing I should say is there will be more consultation meetings.
Yes.
This was a preliminary meeting.
Yes.
And there will be more of these meetings. Oh, the Christmas cheer starts early. Thank you, Matt. There'll be more of these meetings, and people really should participate. I can see Father Christmases
and snow, which is always a little bit ironic, considering that it's going to be 30 degrees tomorrow. And
yes. As part of my life transformation project, I now walk to work in the mornings.
That is commendable.
Which is really nice, except I'm fairly unfit, and it's getting quite hot. And so my walk is becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Anyway, I don't know how we got from that to Christmas music to my walk.
it's one of the wonderful little ambles down a path that we
Yes.
take on this show.
So let's get straight back to the point. There will be more consultation meetings.
Yes, there will.
The time frames we're looking at is they want to put out the tender at some point, sort of May, June next year. That process needs to be finalized. And then they're going to start constructing whatever it is that they end up constructing towards the end of next year, and they're looking at completion sometime late 2022. So this is a fairly long-term project, and people's views are welcome, but those views need to be given now.
Time
People need
is
to participate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, in the meantime, because I'm having difficulty concentrating on more than one thing at a time, Matthew Better, I'm going to ask you just to leave off the music. Just thank you very much for a moment. We'll get back to that a little bit later.
But
while I have
it
drink
was a
of water.
lovely festive
was.
note to start the show on.
Okay, so take us through what the project entails, because it's quite limited in scope.
It is, yes. So I think that the first point to make probably is that this is actually not the first time this has come up. So a number of years ago, there was a precinct plan that was planned, for want of a better word that doesn't sound too tautological. But that also had public participation meetings involved, in which the M.R.A was active and did participate. And there were a number of things that were agreed to as part of that original precinct plan that then seemed to fall by the wayside a little bit when the final document was prepared and ready to go. And it kind of appeared that everything that the Melville residents and Greater Melville had brought forward wasn't really included into their final thinking. So that plan included, 6 to 8 story buildings being allowed to be built along Main Road, things that just really didn't make sense for the suburb at all. That then appears to have been gathering dust on a shelf somewhere in the city's archives for quite a while, and seemed to have gone away. I don't know if this is now a reworking of that precinct plan or a completely separate and new development. It certainly doesn't seem to have as wide a scope as that original precinct plan does.
So let's just talk about the scope here. I attended the meeting as part of my growing sense of civic responsibility.
You are an excellent example.
I have to say, I mean, the problem with these meetings is I live in Melville. I love Melville. This is where I work. I'm really interested. But about an hour before the meeting, I was sitting going, what excuses can I find to not be there? And I was simply not able to find a sufficiently good excuse. And so I attended, and I'm happy I did. I was expecting something much bigger. I was expecting a much broader footprint.
Yeah.
But the footprint we're talking about really is from Kingsway down Main Road, all the way down to about 6th Avenue. So it just goes a little bit past 4th, 2 roads past 4th. Doesn't go all the way to the dip. Doesn't go to Judith. It's that stretch.
It's quite contained, yeah.
And then what they're talking about is pretty basic stuff. So I'm going to give you my sense, and then I'll give get a broader view from you. But we're talking about fixing pavements, using a single standard material that looks Melville and is ecologically friendly and looks local, etc., for that paving. Reducing the size of the pavement, increasing the size of the pavement a little bit, reducing space for parking a tiny little bit in a way that they say isn't going to have much of an effect, but will make it more pedestrian friendly. Some dwelling and some sitting areas along that stretch so that pedestrians have a place to go and sit on some street furniture. The creation of a bit of a median and moving the lights from the side of the road to the median, and I believe on a stretch of that road also changing to more ecologically friendly lights from the existing halogen. And that was pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, you have pretty much covered it. I mean, broadly speaking, if you want the development terms, I suppose, it's basically looking at traffic calming measures, beautification, and ways to make Main Road in particular, although I do believe that they were talking about 7th and 4th to a lesser extent as well, 7th Street and 4th Avenue, and also trying to make it more safer and more practical.
So the traffic calming stuff we're talking about would be things like raised intersections to force people to slow down a little bit. We're not talking rumble strips. We're not talking huge bumps.
I would be surprised if it turns into that. I do believe that a road traffic study is one of the things that is on the cards, which is not a short process, but is something that they're wanting to do. And whatever that study comes out with will be taken into account as part of their planning. But I would be surprised if it turns into rumble strips and giant speed bumps and all of the rest of that.
And if we can just talk budget, just to give a sense of the scope. So they have a scoping phase, which is from now until sort of mid next year, which includes the traffic study, which I believe is about 1.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
And then the lady from the development agency was talking about another roughly 20 million odd rand, which is allocated for the beautification project. And now they want residents to help them create this vision. So that's sort of where we are.
Yes, essentially. And I suspect that, like we were talking earlier, that the scope seems to have shrunk down from what it originally was a number of years ago with the precinct plan, is that with the wonderful year that 2020 has been, the city of Johannesburg is probably reallocating funds and realized that they don't have enough to go as big as they would have liked to have gone. When all is said and done, in terms of development, 20 million isn't really that much money. I know it sounds like a massive amount, but costs build up quickly. And of course, somebody's got to take some payment along the side and all of that kind of stuff.
So you say. I mean, I wouldn't talk to motives, but I will say that we have some of the data that I saw on a previous thing. It costs us a lot of money in South Africa to build a road per kilometer. Much more than you would expect the average kilometer road would cost. And it is possible to draw an inference. Now you see how carefully I put that. It's possible to draw an inference that perhaps it is because margins upon margins upon margins need to be accommodated for. Okay, so that's not even an allegation. That's just a sense of grumpiness that we all have as citizens. Let's just talk about the politics quickly. Again, my involvement with the M.R.A has been really limited to having these conversations with you, to my great shame. And so I come at this with a fairly neutral newcomer's perspective. But the sense that I'm getting from the M.R.A is this whole discussion a couple of years ago about the precinct development plan and the feeling that what was said in the meetings and the M.R.A's input and other residents' input was not reflected in the final plan, has now led to let's call it a trust deficit. So now the city comes in with this fairly limited, and I would say on the merits, apparently uncontroversial plan. And now the first reaction of some people who were involved in the previous process is, ooh, I don't know if we can trust them. Is that a constructive way to approach the project?
No, not necessarily. I wouldn't do. I think that the way to approach this current proposal that's before us is to be participatory and supportive as possible. I mean, it's very difficult to argue against things like traffic calming measures and beautification of the streets. If that's going to be a project that the city is involved in and willing to get behind, then I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't be willing to get behind that and support them in that. But what I do think is important is that whatever the end result of this process, it is something that the people who live, work, and frequent the suburb can be happy about, and that they feel that they have some ownership in. It's all very well to talk about, beautification and places where you can sit and enjoy the sidewalk and everything. But if no one wants to use that sidewalk, then those places are going to stand there pretty much useless and eventually end up being run down.
Okay, so we can talk about some of the risks, so some of the benefits in a second. Let me just cast the net as wide as possible. If you have an interest in this issue or in any of the other issues that we'll be discussing this evening, contact us 066 013 4229. That's WhatsApp. I'll repeat 066 013 4229. YouTube, ilovemelville.live, and on Instagram, ilovemelville.live as well. Facebook, ilovemelville.live. You can send us comments. We'll try and read them. We'll try and respond to them. So here's the first question, as a fairly generally uninvolved citizen. I was surprised in the process by how much consultation there needs to be for something that, in my view, is actually quite simple.
Mm.
So I was surprised that, if you're talking about rebuilding a suburb, yes, I can imagine that detailed consultation would be necessary. If you're talking about changing where the light is and repaving a sidewalk, it's odd to me that you would have then these multiple sessions of consultations and scoping, etc., etc. And something that, in my view, repave a pavement, a sidewalk, and put in some lights, that should be a fairly quick thing. This is a thing that, even if it gets done in the way that we're currently envisaging it, will take 2.5 years.
Mm.
That seems very inefficient to me. Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, you're not wrong when you talk about bureaucracy being inefficient. I mean, that's just a state of that's a truth about bureaucracy the world over. In terms of, could the process be more streamlined? Yeah, it probably could, but you're talking about removing a lot of the public participation from the process. And I think that that's quite a dangerous approach to have. We are talking about stuff that, as you say, might seem a little bit inconsequential.
Oh, I have a word for it. Pedestrian.
But oh,
Right.
look at you go.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, these things might seem pedestrian, just widening some pedestrian sidewalks and all of the rest. But I would argue that the people who are directly affected by these changes, i.e., the residents of Melville and the businesses that operate here, should definitely have a say in those things if they want to feel like they have any kind of if they want to go on feeling like they have any kind of active role within the community that they live.
Is that the trade-off, right? If you want things to happen quickly, you have no voice. If you want a voice, then you must accept a little bit of conflict and a lot of delay.
Yeah, well, I mean, Plato did say that democracy was the second worst way to rule a country, didn't he? But yeah, I would say that is some of the trade-off. Nothing ever happens quickly by committee. But I think that the alternative, and this is a personal feeling, I'm open to being argued against. But I would say that the alternative, which is somebody's just going to rock up, make a decision, and then it must happen, is dangerous and in the end doesn't really build on community or a sense of shared place. And I think that above all else is what we should be trying to build here in Melville, and in a greater sense our city and our province and our country is a shared sense of place. And I think you can only get that by public participation, and unfortunately that does mean that you need to slow things down a little bit and listen to all the voices involved.
Okay, so let's start on the negative end with the risks. So the one risk I think we've identified is a worry that the consultation process may in itself not be what's the word I'm looking for? May not be a genuine consultation process, right? So going back to the experience that some M.R.A people have told me about the whole precinct plan engagement, is one risk is we're being asked for participation, we're being asked to comment, but maybe the city's going to do what it likes in any case. So the way you manage that risk at the moment is insist that everything is minuted. I see the first minutes have arrived. Follow the process quite diligently, see that comments are taken into account and that there's then some rational decision making about those comments, and basically just keep people's feet to the fire, right? So involvement, systematic involvement in the process is then the best cure for that risk.
I would say so, yeah. And trying to be as open and communicative with all the various stakeholders as possible, right? So, I mean, we're talking about some fairly small fry participants, if you want to call them that, i.e., the little guy on the side of the road in his house who doesn't want to have too much traffic passing by, all the way through to the University of Joburg, all of whom are going to want to have some say and are all going to have different kind of goals and wants and requirements for whatever this plan ends up being. But I think that the more participation we can have amongst all the various stakeholders and the more agreement that can be reached, the easier it will be to get the city to then listen to those participations, because they'll be coming from a united place as opposed to just all these disparate voices coming in from all over the show.
Right. The second risk, it seems to me to be that something gets built, something gets constructed that then either causes undesirable social behavior.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that in a little bit more detail. Or that is constructed in such a way or designed in such a way and then not maintained properly, or is not easy to be maintained, and so then degenerates after a short period of time, leaving us in an unacceptable position. What other risks should residents be looking at?
Specifically towards this plan,
Specifically in terms of this plan. So as M.R.A, as a resident, in terms of what you would advise other residents, is what are the questions we should be asking here? So let's set aside the trust issue. We've got a plan for the trust issue. What other things should we be asking?
I think that we should also be asking what the mandate is of the people involved in this. Where has this process come from, right? Why are we talking about this now? What is the reason behind all of that? Not that that's a risk so much as it is just a useful piece of information to have and to know what this does. It form a larger scope throughout the city? Are we just talking about Main Road and Auckland Park just because? And that's not particularly clear at the moment from the city side. Is why now and why us, basically. Not that we're necessarily complaining about it being us, but that transparency, I think, is a very important one. And then also just making sure that, particularly from a resident's point of view, that whatever is being considered is something that is good for the residents. And I think that the risk can be that the residents' voices can quickly be drowned out in favor of larger stakeholders and people who jump up and down and scream louder.
Right.
And I think that it's important that the Melville community as a whole is seen to be putting in their opinion so that it is not lost in the melee.
Okay. I'm trying to understand, and I think I'm trying to convey what there's an ad campaign. What could go wrong, and then quite a lot of stuff happened to go wrong, which is just how the universe works through the engine of irony.
Be careful of asking that question.
But I mean, do we have a sense of what could potentially go wrong with this project that we need to be concerned about now? That we need to say, look, risk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We need you guys in city council to make sure that you don't do or do A, B, C, D to manage those risks.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see any initial risks with the plan itself, right? I mean, as we were talking earlier, traffic calming measures, beautification, safer streets, more practical streets, all of those things in themselves sound like very good ideas that are very easy to get behind. I think where we need to be vigilant, and this is something that, is part of all of our greater civic duties, whether you're in Melville or not, is the execution of those and then the follow-up. So is this going to be an open and transparent process where there is limited scope for people for corruption to seep in, because that's how projects get very expensive and very delayed very quickly, and not done properly.
But it looks like if you really want to make money, then you should get involved in asbestos assessment, especially in the Free State.
That's where the money is right now.
Yeah.
I'm looking to buy shares, but I haven't found the right investor yet. So
not listed anywhere you can find.
Not that I can find, but I'll let you know. So,
But yeah, in part, corruption is a problem. It's ubiquitous in our perception, and it may very well be ubiquitous in actuality.
hmm.
Um, the consultation process isn't really going to allow us to address that risk, though, because the residents aren't going to get a say in who gets appointed to do what. The residents aren't going to see the QS estimates. Um, so we may worry that, maybe this thing is open to, vulnerable to some corruption and some overpayment, but nah, in a sense, the city's spending the money that it's budgeted, and whatever happens behind closed doors, we won't get to know about. So how do we? I think that the the thing that I'm trying to understand is, looking at this proposal as a non-expert, um, and everything looks good. Is that a problem? Are there questions that I should be asking that I'm not asking because I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the experience to be able to look behind the first level of information?
I wouldn't have said so. No, I mean, well, I'll qualify that by saying, if you're looking at the proposal and you're saying, well, as a resident in Melville who walks to work every day, your concerns are primarily going to be, well, is it safe? Can I walk all the way from my house to my place of work without having to step onto a street and potentially get run over? Is it clean? Am I choking down exhaust fumes as I go through? Those are the things that are really important to you on your walk through the city, through the suburb. If this plan seeks to address those and rectify them, and does it successfully, then is there a risk involved? I'm not sure that there is, in this initial phase. I think that what is important in terms of the phase of public participation and all of that is that those points keep on being hammered home to the people involved in the planning document and the people who are going to be taking this through the next phases, so that when those people sit in the further development meetings and the QS meetings and the design meetings, all of those fun things, they've always got that thought being hammered into them that, like, it's about traffic calming, it's about beautification, it's about safety, it's about practicality. um so I don't know if you can look at it and say, are there risks, or is there anything wrong with it?
Mhm.
um I think that on the face of it, it all sounds very good. The places that I would be keeping an eye on would be the transparency behind it, um and that includes, who are the stakeholders? Do we have access to all those stakeholders? Can we talk amongst stakeholders? Again, our wants and needs are going to be very different from UJ's wants and needs, which is not to say that they'll be incompatible, but it
Mm.
is important that we know of each other and have access to be able to talk to each other. That we have access to the meetings or recordings of minutes of the meetings, or access to the recordings of those meetings, and that we know where these people come from, what is their mandate, and what the process is, and that we are informed of the process as it goes forward.
One of the things that was interesting to me in the preamble to the meeting, there was somebody from the I think they're the consulting architectural company, the project managers, um, and she was saying that one of the key things that they want to do is Melville is one of the oldest suburbs in the city, and it has a long and interesting history. And some of that history is still alive in terms of the heritage of the buildings. Um, and some of that history is very much alive in terms of Melville Copies, which is a very old, I believe, early Iron Age forge with some architectural value and some tourism value.
Hmm.
And that the one of the things they wanted to do with this beautification project was also to nod to that history, to show a little bit of that history, also in terms of the design language, um, and to make the suburb a little bit more attractive for tourists, who would also want to be pedestrians, right? So you
Hmm.
want to be able to roam. What was interesting to me, though, is that if you're saying we're talking about Melville and the history going all the way, as far as we can see, from Iron Age up. It's odd then that you would stop the beautification project at 6th Avenue, which is a couple of avenues above what you would need in order to be able to get access to Melville copies, for instance. It was also odd to me that they would be, they would have signage saying "Welcome to Melville," but no plans at the moment for signage talking about the history of Melville or highlighting important or interesting historical places or anything like that. But when raised, they were quite open, or they seemed quite open to integrating some of these suggestions. So I think maybe that's, aside from just looking at the risks and how do we manage for the risks, is also to say, well, if we're doing this, how do we make it a little bit better? How do we tell a little bit more of the story? How do we promote ourselves a little bit more as a tourist destination? So it's not just negative; it's positive as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that the whole point of the public participation process is to be able to bring ideas and constructive feedback as well. In fact, that should be the primary focus, in my opinion. I
Now,
mean,
hold on, just before you carry on with that thought, it's just gone half past the hour. We're going to take a very quick break. We'll be back in a second. Please do participate if you have questions or comments on 0660134229 or ilovemelville.live on Facebook or on YouTube. We're back. This is the Melville Residents Association show on I Love Melville. My name is Johan Prince. My guest tonight is Matthew Lewis. We're talking for the moment about the Melville Auckland Park Public Environment Upgrade Project. I have to read that carefully. The meeting was held last week, consultation meeting, beginning of a consultation process on beautification, primarily of Main Road, from UJ essentially all the way down to 6th Avenue. And we were talking about the pros and the cons and the risks and the slight lack of trust that some people have because of previous processes. And just before the break, we were chatting about the fact that there's also a place to, or an opportunity for residents to contribute an idea that may make the project a little bit better. And that may be something as simple as having information signs up to talk about the history of Melville, or some form of an indication of locations of historical interest. And my personal view, making it possible for people to actually be able to go from University Road or from Kingsway all the way down to Melville Copy, so that you create an integrated whole. But that's just my view. One of the, or if I can summarize some of the concerns that were raised in terms of widening sidewalks, creating, emplacing more street furniture, was we have a problem in Melville, as in many places in Joburg at the moment, with homelessness and displaced people. And the question was whether this kind of renovation is going to make the area more attractive as a place for homeless people, displaced people to come and live, and what would be the impact of that on other residents, and what would be the impact of that on businesses, especially down Main Road, and what the deal is going to be in terms of public transport. I beg your pardon, specifically taxi stands, bus stands. Will there be more? Will there be fewer? Will they be placed in places that make more sense? Those are legitimate concerns.
Absolutely. Um, so, in a perfect world, in which we certainly are not living, but in a perfect world, just to set a sort of like baseline, if you like, with a population of displaced people, you would have a unit that is part of the city that would come, um, that would offer these people shelter and the opportunity to, for want of, I don't want to say rehabilitate because it sounds like they're all in need of NA and AA, but a chance to work towards finding a job, getting on their feet again, supporting themselves, all the rest of that kind of stuff. The city of Joburg does have those facilities. The problem is they're understaffed, they're under-resourced, they're underfunded, as pretty much all of these things are at the moment.
Big problem, small tool.
Exactly. We cannot get away from the fact that, and we are certainly not the only suburb in the country that is dealing with a displaced persons problem, that is dealing with, people who have lost their livelihoods, who have lost their homes, who are in a very desperate place right now. Whether or not we are going to encourage more of those people to come by building benches for people to sit on and on a wider sidewalk, I I don't know if that would be a deciding factor for them. I think that they would come here whether that was the case or not. Um, with regards to the strain that puts on businesses and residents, and indeed tourists and visitors to the suburb, because let's be honest, what tourist wants to be walking down Main Road and have to be stepping over displaced persons sleeping in the sidewalk? It is an issue that needs to be dealt with. I don't think it should be the deciding factor in whether or not this development plan goes ahead or not. I think that there are things that we can do in conjunction with that, and that should possibly fall in line with this, that helps us deal with that displaced persons problem.
So a similar concern which was raised, and I want to be careful that in time we're talking about these two things together, but they're, the Venn diagram overlap is not 100%. It's a very tiny overlap. But one of the other questions was, if you're attracting more pedestrians, you're attracting more people to roam the street, you're also creating a bigger attraction for street crime. Which I suppose sort of comes down to the same answer then.
Yeah, I think that, what is the really, really important part about this whole process is that it is approached holistically. So that architect that got up and spoke about, well, there's such a rich history in Melville and it goes all the way back to the Iron Age or whenever it was, and we'd really like to incorporate some of that, is all really good, but it sounds quite like, designer speak. It's a little bit abstract, and Dale would kill me if she could hear me. I hope she's not listening. But there are practicalities that need to be taken into account, such as, okay, if you are going to have increased foot traffic, if you are going to invite people to be walking up and down these roads, you are opening up the possibility of pickpockets, of muggings, of all of that nasty stuff. So we need to look at security. We need to look at having visible policing, or at the very least, we need to look at like some of the things that Cape Town has done, where they have the Improvement District security patrols that are on the streets constantly and visible constantly. And those, by all accounts, have proved to be pretty popular and successful down in Cape Town. How we translate that up here is, again, something that needs to be done in conjunction with the city. But I think that the important part is that it is done as a holistic thing. So that it's not just, okay, well, we're going to plant some plants on the sidewalk and then we'll have a beautiful street. It needs to be seen as an ongoing thing. It needs to be sustainable, and it needs to be, something that continues. Uh,
So we have then a problem or a decision to make, right? So my understanding of the project at the moment is that this is a JDA project,
yes.
which is Johannesburg Development Agency. They were quite clear, um, and I'm paraphrasing wildly, so I'm really not quoting, but they were quite clear that they're not the police.
Hmm.
They're not the Metro Police. They're not City Power. They're not Joburg Water. They their job is just this thing. So they're not dealing with policing. They're not in this project dealing with upkeep and maintenance. They're not dealing with any of those other issues because that's just how they're structured. And we understand that if you want to improve the lived environment, you have to have a holistic approach. But that's not going to happen, right? That's not on offer. It's not on the menu at the moment.
Hmm.
So now what do we do? Do you take I'm going to take one extreme to say, well, because there may be crime and because there may be antisocial behavior and because there may be an influx of needy people, rather don't fix the sidewalk. Just don't do anything, right? Do
Hmm.
nothing unless you can do everything.
Hmm.
That's sort of one potential approach that one could take. Um, or all the way on the other side, you could take the approach that says, well, you know what, as long as you're just fixing the paving, I'll take anything I can get. How should we be thinking about this?
I would be really wary of the latter approach of just, oh, well, thank you for fixing the pavement. Woohoo. Um, I think that it is within our rights and should be part of our expectations that we can demand that there is a more holistic approach. I don't think that it needs to veer all the way through to, oh, well, just scrap it then if you can't make all of this happen. But we are talking about an agency that is directly managed by the city of Joburg. And you cannot tell me that it is impossible for one part of city of Joburg to talk to another part of city of Joburg. And I think that as stakeholders in the project, we need to make those demands. We need to say, well, you need to start thinking about security and the police. And if you are not dealing with security, then you need to have someone from JMPD or somebody start attending these meetings, because ultimately they are stakeholders in this project as well. Because when there is a pickpocketing incident or there is some kind of antisocial behavior, they are going to be the ones who are called to site to deal with it. Um, and so, we go back to the whole notion of, well, who are the stakeholders? Well, then JMPD probably needs to be part of this, and have a say in this. City Power should probably have a say in this if they're talking about replacing streetlights. What are the City Power specifications for decent streetlights?
Mm-hmm.
It's not good enough to listen to a city agency sit there and go, well, we're just doing this because that's where our mandate sits. Fine, if that's your mandate, then you also need to bring in people who have this mandate, who we can talk to as well. And I think that that should be a very strong message from us as residents of Melville, that until we can have all of the stakeholders, until we can speak to all of the different branches of the city that this is going to involve, then we're not interested. But I'm not saying that we should can it completely, because I think that that would be a huge pity. I think that I think that beautification of Main Road and the surrounding areas would be a really wonderful thing. And if, the architects who are involved in this want to enhance the history of the place and some of the heritage of the place, that's also fantastic. But there's been far too many projects that don't take into account all of the various aspects that are involved in something like
So,
this.
so I put before you a binary choice. I said, is it the extreme this or the extreme that? And you're saying to me, well, no, that you're rejecting the binary choice completely.
Absolutely, because I'm a Piscean.
Okay. Um, yeah, I'm at a loss for words now. Well, I'm not actually at a loss for words, but most of the words that I wish to utter just a moment ago are not broadcastable, so I won't. Do participate if you have a question or a comment. 0660134229. That's on WhatsApp, or ilovemelville.live on YouTube and Facebook. Okay, so maybe that then is the position that we should be taking is we've got a problem of many parts. We have potential solutions which require many parts. Don't just bring two parts.
I think that part of their stated aim is to make the sidewalks and everything safer. Well, what do they mean by that? Because they can't say, well, we want to make it safer and more practical, and then say, but we're not dealing with security. So, it needs to be something that is very strongly put forward to them, that the things that are important to us are these things. And if you are talking about a project that purports to do all these things, then you need to follow through on that.
So there's a demand that we can act on. We give us a holistic solution. The fact that you happen to have structured city government in a specific way and that the budgets happen to have specific buckets, that's your problem. That's not the residents' problem. The residents want a solution that is sustainable, not just in terms of the materials you're using, but also the social services that need to go around this thing for this to work.
Yeah. Well, otherwise we're going to sit with 20 million rand being wasted
On really nice street furniture.
on really nice street furniture.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right, but I think that makes sense. I'm suitably cowed. Okay, so the position you're suggesting at the moment, let me just summarize, is we're saying participate, keep a careful eye on what's happening in the process, just to make sure that there are no stalking horses trying to get us into a different place than one that maybe residents want to go to, and insist on asking holistic questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, yeah, to hammer the point home, please participate. There is another public participation meeting coming up sometime in January. If you are able to make it, such as yourself, please do come along. But we will attempt as the executive to be as communicative about that as possible as well. So someone from the M.R.A committee will be there and will be available to report back to residents by and large as well.
Okay. And all of the documentation you'll also put up on the website. So that's ilovemelville.co.za. The M.R.A website will pop links onto our website as well. So even if you can't come, stay engaged. If you have a suggestion, make yourself heard.
Absolutely.
People have been making themselves heard through your survey.
They have indeed. They have indeed.
Survey started when?
We sent out the survey beginning of November, so it's been running for roughly a month now, and it closes on the 14th, I think. So a few more days to go. And we've had 112 responses so far, which is not bad going in terms of a decent portion of the Melville residents. And yeah, it's been interesting to see some of the feedback and some of the responses that we've been getting.
So that's what that's around 8% of what we think the population is.
If you're talking about individuals, it's higher, about 25%. If you're talking about households, of what we think.
And in general, what you've received would have been, as far as you can tell, a response per household.
Yeah, we would not expect more than one person in the household to be registered on our database. So it would be per household, as far as we are taking the data.
Okay. And what sorts of questions?
So we kind of divided it up into a number of different parts. Sorry, I keep on knocking my microphone and then causing serious ear pain for people. But they followed the different portfolios that we've kind of been dividing the M.R.A up into, and then asking people to tell us if they agree with that. Should that be something that we are focusing on? And if they have any further ideas of what we should be focused on, if they'd like to help, what kind of suggestions do they have, all of that kind of stuff. And then and possibly most importantly, the question, would you like to stay informed? And the answers were either no, just leave me alone, or yes, please keep me informed. So
okay, well, I think maybe we'll get to that question a little bit towards the end. Just run us through the portfolios again. So you separated questions by portfolios, and then you said for each portfolio, this is what are the priorities? What do you think is important? So portfolios broadly are what?
So portfolios broadly are physical environment, community development, liquor license, zoning and land use, heritage, and governance. So to drill down a little bit more into that information. So physical environment would include the cleaning up of litter from streets. Actually, broadly, a lot of what we were just talking about with the development plan. Ensuring bins are being kept emptied, keeping rubble from being dumped, manhole covers, street potholes, all of that kind of stuff. Making sure that's followed up on. Community development, what can we do to make Melville an appealing place to be in? Family activities, general community development initiatives, dealing with social issues such as the displaced persons issue, markets, things like that we can, bring into Melville that might be good for residents and businesses alike in the area. Then obviously the big one that's always been that catches a lot of attention pretty much all of the time is the liquor licensing, zoning, and land use, which we've spent a lot of time discussing in the show, obviously. It's a fairly onerous portfolio to be involved in because it requires a lot of liaising with the Gauteng Liquor Board and all of those fun people and lodging complaints and being the hated and nasty person all the time. But yeah, I mean, that is really what it says it is, keeping tabs on the liquor licenses that are active within the suburb, the land use and the zoning within the suburb, and all of those fun stuff. Then we've got heritage, which is the maintaining and conserving of the buildings that have historical and significance in the suburb that we were talking to Dale about a few weeks ago. And then finally, governance, which is liaising with the ward councillor, with the city of Joburg, making sure that, we are being heard on the governance level as best as we can, and keeping tabs on complaints and feedback from residents and from the city and the ward councillor and all of those kind of people.
That would be things also like electricity bills and, all of the interaction with local government that may be problematic for people.
Correct.
Okay. What did people say?
So many things. So in general sort of support of each of those portfolios, the ones that came out quite tops were physical environment, with 94.5% agreeing that physical environment was an incredibly important portfolio that we should be focusing on. Just 1.82% disagreed that it was something that wasn't particularly important for them. So that's kind of interesting. That gives us a good idea of, physical environment, which does make sense, is important to the residents of Melville, and is something that we need to amp up our efforts in. And how do we go about beautifying even further? Let me
just quickly ask a methodological question, just so that we understand what kind of data we're looking at. If I say to you, what's important, being healthy, wealthy, and or wise, rate out of 5, then most people are going to say, well, yeah, all 3.
All of those.
Were respondents forced to rank things competitively, to say, well, if you had to choose between A and B, which one is most important to you?
No, we asked them to just give us a response to each one, i.e., yes, I agree this is important, I disagree this is not important, or I'm neutral on it. We did ask them to, further on in the survey, give us any kind of feedback about what is most important to them on a more kind of personal level.
Right.
We wanted
so it's almost a question at the moment of, these are the things that we're busy with. Do you think that these things are worthwhile being busy with? That's really the question that we're asking at the moment. Okay.
Exactly. And I suppose the overall response has been, yes, all of these things are worthwhile, which is nice to see. On community development, people were a bit more ambivalent about it. We had 24.5% say they're neutral, with 73.6% saying, yes, no, they agreed community development is an important aspect. And I think that part of the reason why we have a higher degree of neutrality there is because it's quite a nebulous concept at the moment. There isn't really any tangible kind of community development thing we can point to go, well, this is what we're talking about,
Right.
community development.
And we're going to try and get to that a little bit later in this show.
We are certainly
is
going
to drill down on that a little bit to give some meat to what community development might mean in practice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If we think we know, who knows? Coming in just underneath physical environment was liquor license, zoning, and land use. 86.3% of people saying that that's something that they agree with, and 11.2 being neutral about it, with 1.8% saying they disagree, that that's an important factor, which is an interesting one, because if you look at the feedback on the WhatsApp groups and everything, you wouldn't have really said that that was something that people are particularly neutral about. But I suppose that's the silent few.
Also possibly a case of, when it is a problem for you, it's a really urgent and
Yes,
important problem,
yeah.
and right now you want the entire world to focus on it. But as if it's not important, if the bar that's bugging you is closed down and everything's nice and quiet on a Sunday morning,
then who cares?
Then you don't care.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. On heritage, 78%, just over 78% said that they agree that heritage is something that is important. 18% were neutral, and 3.6% disagreed that heritage was something that we should focus on. And finally, on governance, which was also the big one, 95.5% saying they agree, 3.6% being neutral, and only 0.91% disagreeing. So the things that people seem to be mostly seem to rank as most important in their lives really is the physical environment, governance, and liquor license and zoning.
Of which physical environment, I think, was scored tops, right? So that was the big thing.
Yeah, just above governance.
Okay. So would it make sense then to interpret the data to say, well, the things that people are going to see visibly on a daily basis, these tended to be the things that were ranked most important.
Yeah.
And the more nebulous things, the things that they couldn't identify, these were the things that naturally ranked less important.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and this makes also a lot of sense when you look at some of the more detailed responses that were given later on. So, we asked the question, is there anything else not mentioned above that you think the M.R.A committee should be paying attention to or is best suited to take on? The first 3 comments are, we have had tremendous problems with fake and incorrect water meter billing. Please can we stand together on this and see to it that it is handled professionally? They can bully us one by one, but not if we are collective. Communes covered in is communes covered in any of the above? If not, management of the number of communes and the attendant issues, noise, service overloads, etc. And this applies to the physical environment. There have been more and more homeless people in the area, and they have been getting more and more aggressive, making the area feel far less safe. Currently concerned about loud music, illegal parking. So, I'd say that the observation that things that are more noticeable to residents are things that are coming to the fore. And they are obviously going to be the things that are most important. Personally, we've been having issues with the water meters billings ourselves. And then, of course, the beautification of the streets. There is a lot of litter, and safety and security and land use. So, that it kind of makes sense.
So fundamentally, all of the above.
Yeah.
Essentially. This is the litany of our problems, and we think you should solve all of them.
Yes, please help.
Okay.
What is helpful, though, is the fact that we've gotten a number of responses of people putting up their hands and saying, yes, please, I would like to help. And that's been really, really good to see, which was really, a large part of the goal of the survey as well, was to get it out there, say, this is what we're focusing on. Would you like to be involved? And having people come back and say, yes, we would actually like to be involved. So that's
what are you doing with those people?
Getting in touch with them.
What's the process now?
So the process now is to really drill down into these responses, find the ones who have said, yes, we would like to be involved. Please let me know. Get in touch with those people. And then see where their talents and their enthusiasm can be best put to use. We had 39.6% of respondents say yes, they would love to get involved, with 60%, just over 60%, saying I'd rather just sit this one out. Which, in terms of people putting up their hands as opposed to just wanting to sit at home, which is perfectly fine, is really quite positive, I feel. And if we can get, 39% of those 110 respondents to be actively involved in the community, then I think that we will be well on our way to having a much more involved and vibrant Melville.
Is there a feedback process that happens now? So people who participated, even people who didn't participate, will they get the results? Will there be a report on, well, thank you very much, these are the actions that we've taken, these are the people who are now involved? Are you, to use marketing speak, closing that loop?
Yes, that is definitely the plan. So we need to sit down as a team and just decide what the best thing to do is, or what if it's a multi-prong approach that we need to follow. We will obviously put a large portion of the results online on the various websites and make those available if you want to take 10 minutes out of your day to click through all of those things and find out what's going on. But what we'd also really like to do is hold some kind of town hall gathering kind of thing for people to have direct access, who we can talk and chat and find out, they can ask us direct questions and we can go through it with them in a bit more detail. I think that it would be best if that was a bit more informal. I'm a little bit allergic to the idea of everybody gathering in a hall and somebody getting on a stage and tapping into the microphone and saying, all right, well, this was the result of the survey. And you know what I mean? I think that it would be far more pleasant and approachable if we were to do it around a cup of coffee at a table at one of the fine establishments on 7th Street that need our support and participation at the moment, for example.
So get to know you and then get to work.
Yes, exactly.
The outreach campaign, the activating the people who've said that they might want to be involved in some way. What's the timeline there?
In terms of getting them involved and on the job and
so
ready
is this
to
a
work?
thing that you're going to be doing now over December, or are you foreseeing that that's going to be a January job?
I think that what we're foreseeing is that we will do the feedback during December, bearing in mind that we might have to do it again in January just because people are away, people might not be able to make it. We would like to spend the rest of December doing a bit more planning and, quite frankly, taking a break from this hellhole of a year. And then to really, and it dovetails quite nicely with things like the public participation of the development plan going into the new year, looking at how to, approach the new year. We can then start to sit down and have a greater discussion with all the volunteers and everybody, and put forward a plan for 2021.
Okay. Anything in the responses that surprised you? Anything you weren't expecting? Anything anything that put your attention to something that you may be doing incorrectly?
No, interestingly enough, I mean, I think that most of the responses made sense if you think about the place that Melville is and what people historically have been interested in. What I was quite surprised about was the amount of people who favored wanting to be involved in things like physical environment. So when we broke it down, 60%, just over 60% of the respondents who said they would like to be involved said they'd like to be involved in the physical environment portfolio, which was the largest of any amount. Coming just below that was community development, then bylaw enforcement, then heritage, and then governance. So looking at that is a little bit surprising for me. I would have expected land use to be quite high up at the top.
But you didn't. So the survey didn't specify, involved in what way.
Well, we did then include if you have an idea of something that is not mentioned above, what would that be? And those coming through have those have been really interesting. There's a really lovely response here that was sent through saying, during lockdown, I started a project to remove cigarette butts from the environment and ensure that they are disposed of responsibly, not to general waste, landfill, or landing up in the ocean via storm water drains. Pre-lockdown, I had planned to pilot a demo project in Melville, which would place bins specifically designed to only take cigarette butts in Seven Delan, 27 boxes, the Spa Boulevard Centre, Rand Steam, and Campus Square. The bins are leased and for a relatively small monthly service fee are cleaned and sanitized monthly. I believe Melville is a perfect environment for the placement of these bins and could set an example for similar areas where cigarette butt litter proliferates. Sorry. So that's a really lovely, constructive, positive kind of
Specific,
actionable thing, right? That could be a really lovely thing to have happen in Melville. We had people coming through saying, they're a single mother, and also looking after an elderly mother with early stage Alzheimer's, but still would love to assist, but more in a background support role, happy assist with admin, record keeping, all of that kind of stuff, which I think is also really beautiful, that somebody who has all of that strain of having to be a single parent and a caregiver to still say that they want to be involved, I think speaks to the kind of people that are involved in Melbourne, or people who live here and do want to get involved.
This was the first survey that you guys have done recently.
Certainly, since I've been living here,
Right.
it's the first survey.
Because it would be interesting, and it's a question you wouldn't be able to answer at the moment, but whether lockdown and COVID and this dreadful year has increased people's sense of wanting to participate, whether it's increased people's awareness of the issues in the suburb, because you're not, getting up, rushing off to work and coming back necessarily. You may be dwelling a little bit more. You may be spending a little bit more time, and so now you see some of the things which are problematic, and you maybe have a little bit more time. So now you can envision yourself participating.
I think so. I think that that's definitely part of it. I think what's also been really remarkable about some of the responses coming through has been the strong sense of community that is shared by Melvillites in general. So, we had responses saying, oh, I'd really like to help 7th, or you should be focusing on helping 7th Street return to its pre-COVID state, support local business, make sure that, we are an ecosystem that is, again, sustainable, that those businesses that have taken strain during lockdown are supported. And I think that that's also really lovely and really important to highlight. There we had respondents saying you should be talking more to the Melville Business Association, making sure that there's more synergy going on there, to use another marketing term.
I'm just going to call nonsense on the synergy term for a second. And I'm going to come back and say, well, what do we have a sense of what synergy may mean in this case? But I interrupted you. You were going through some lovely responses.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a very strong sense of community. And even when people are raising the displaced persons problem, it's coming from a space of like, well, what can we do to help? What can we do to deal with the problem in a way that is socially responsible? And I think that just, it really highlights the beautiful place that Melville is. And it's really nice to see that we haven't been too far off the mark with what we prioritized as the committee, and that people are willing to get behind that, which has been really quite nice. I mean, 89% of respondents said that they would like us to keep in contact with them in general, and be, updated on news and developments and all of that kind of stuff. And with only 10.6% saying, no, just leave me alone. So, that's nice.
That's not a bad stat.
No, it isn't.
Okay. Now, anything else of note in this survey that might be interesting for us to have a look at now?
One of the, or a couple of the things that have always kind of been on the periphery of people's agendas in Melville, which I personally, in my own capacity, think would be wonderful, is things like making 7th a permanent pedestrian street. I do understand that there are massive practicalities involved in making that happen that probably get in the way of making that happen. But we've had people come back saying stuff like that again. Yeah, and I think road closures and access to 10th and 11th Avenue, entrance through 3rd Street. So there is a fairly wide
Was that a
gambit.
big? There's been some talk about road closures and some fairly serious opposition to road closures. Did that come up as a common response, or was it a fairly limited request?
It's relatively limited. I think that there has, well, I mean, looking at the responses here, we've got a road closures, traffic calming boomed areas. So that's 1, 2. And that's really essentially it. Most of it comes down to safety, security, beautification, and business support, really. Keeping 7th Street vibrant with a mix of independent shops and restaurants. Things like that I think are important. I think that the whole boomed off areas thing is a really difficult one to try and achieve as well. I mean, we spoke at the beginning of this about how a traffic study can cost 1 million rand. And that's going to be a fairly large traffic study. So, yeah.
Okay. But not huge groundswell of support. Not a from what the survey shows. Not a primary issue of people at the moment.
No, I wouldn't have said so.
Okay, so let's talk about the lived environment and about the community development stuff. We said earlier that this is something that people may find fairly nebulous. This is the thing that you've taken on.
Yes.
This is the portfolio that you want to run with. Really, next year is going to be your first full year doing this.
Yes, for my sanity and
for your sanity. So, what are you thinking that might entail?
So I think that our first really important issue that we're going to tackle is trying to network with the city about the displaced people in the suburb, trying to figure out who they are, where they come from, what do they want/need, and what can we do in conjunction with the city to help alleviate that problem. From what I have found on the COJ website, there is a unit which is supposed to provide displaced persons with shelter that is based in Hillbrow. My understanding of that center is that there's very seldom any room there. And there would probably be even less now, considering the proliferation of people who have lost their homes and their livelihoods and everything because of COVID. So I think that will be our primary focus at the beginning of the year, is seeing if we can approach that problem from a community development point of view, and see where we get to. Because part of our problem with an issue such as this, we just have no idea. We don't know numbers. We don't know who they are. We don't know where, is it transient? Are they just stopping off on their way somewhere else? Are they permanently in this area? We just don't know. So I think establishing a kind of baseline set of knowledge would be the important first point, and then being able to go to the city
and you see what resources are available.
Exactly.
And then if the resources aren't fit for purpose, then at least at that point that solution won't come from that direction. A different solution will need to be found.
Yes.
We spoke about this previously in terms of displaced people. The principles are human beings, so you need to treat human beings as human beings, but human beings are also expected to follow the rules and to respect other human beings, and if you don't, then that's going to be a problem. And that remains the approach.
I would say so. Yeah. There is, to my knowledge, there is no, and I think that this is something that we need to really highlight going forward, is that there is no interface between the Melville resident community at large, or businesses in the area, or anybody really, and the displaced people themselves. So at the moment, it's this like kind of othering effect of like, oh, well, that's them over there and that's them over there, and never the two shall meet.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the first hurdle that we need to overcome, is to be able to understand the problem properly. Because at the moment, it's just a bunch of people getting irate on WhatsApp groups, um, sometimes for very legitimate reasons. I'm not trying to, you know,
Mm.
downplay any of that in any way, shape, or form. But I am firmly of the belief that, we need to understand the problem properly, get a very clear picture of what's going on, and talk to the city, talk to other leaders in the community, whether that's the churches, whether that's whoever that is,
Mm.
and then we can try and find a way forward from there.
Okay. Aside from that, community development, what other priorities have you set for yourself?
So I would also really like to, I would like to see Melville become a place that welcomes visitors in a wholesome way as well. So that doesn't necessarily mean, shut down all the bars and clubs and make it a paradise for with children's playgrounds and everything. But it is somewhere that we would like, again, for people to be able to take a walk around on a Sunday, and spend time in, whether that includes sort of heritage walks through the suburb. Um, and again, this all dovetails quite nicely with what the JDA is talking about, with, signposts up saying in this house in 19 whatever such and such happened, and looking at having Melville copies be become a designated heritage site that doesn't that enjoys a bit more protection,
Mhm.
that people can visit without feeling unsafe, all of that kind of stuff. And then looking at ways to enhance the community, with in tandem with the businesses here. So, how do we bring more people to Seventh during the day who are then going to spend their time in Seventh the whole time, which makes it sustainable for not just Dela Creme is a coffee shop where you go have breakfast, but then for the bookstore that you go on to next door to go and browse whatever they've got, and then take a walk up and, um, you know, go and check out the furniture store over there, and all of that kind of stuff. So you can almost get to a point where we make Melville a really lovely day out, as opposed to just drive in and drive out again.
I suppose one of your key objectives long term must be creating that sense or leveraging that sense of community,
Mm,
right? So first step is get people to talk to each other.
mm,
Second
exactly.
step is get people to do stuff together. It almost doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
It's about creating an opportunity for you to meet your neighbors a couple of streets down and begin to feel like you're amongst broadly like-minded people,
Mm,
that there's a community of people who care about the environment, and that we're going to do stuff together from time to time to make things better, even if it is just walking up and down. Everybody gets a block, and you pick up some of the litter. That then creates a positive feedback loop in theory, which makes bigger and bigger projects possible over time.
yeah.
Is that sort of the general approach that you're taking?
That has a large part to do with it. I'm a big believer in people who feel empowered within the community are going to want to make that community even better in the long run, right? As opposed to just hiding behind our walls and our fences and everything, is to be involved and active in developing the community. Um, it's it is, and it is a very nebulous idea to say, well, we're doing community development now. But I think that part of the point of the portfolio as well is that depending on what project it is that we're working on, that could be in conjunction with physical environment, or it
Mhm.
could be in conjunction with heritage, or whatever it is. It could be in conjunction with the businesses that are interested in being a part of that initiative. And so, almost of necessity, it needs to be a little bit nebulous and just be taken on a project per project basis. Um, and as you say, then working towards establishing that feedback loop of positivity, of creating a community. Um, because I do feel that that is a really important part of keeping the suburb vibrant and
Mm.
alive.
And if people are saying, we need to stand together when it comes to the problems, you're only really going to stand together if you have a sense of connection.
Yeah.
If you have an idea of who you can call, and your neighbors.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You can live in Melville quite easily. I suppose in any other urban environment, you can live for years without having any idea who's around you,
Yeah,
without knowing
absolutely.
names and stories. And
Well, I mean, part of the reason why I really fell in love with Melville is, I mean, I grew up in Four Ways, back when Four Ways literally was a Four Ways
right,
intersection, but witnessed the building of Four Ways Mall, and then the building of Monte Casino, and the building of the high walls and the electric fences and everything, and spent my teenage years never knowing who it was that we were living next to. And then went away and lived my 20s and everything, and then moved in here, and was invited to a street party with all of our neighbors and got to know all of these people who lived on the street with us. And so from very early on living here, there's always been a sense of community, and it's a wonderful thing to be a part of, and I think something that needs to be nurtured very, very strongly, because I think it is part of what makes Melville a special place to be, and it would be very sad to lose that identity of a common humanity in a way.
okay. Well, let's hope all of that works. We're sorry. Was my I think my cynicism popped out there for a second. Let me just pop it back in its box. It's I think been that kind of year.
Yes, it has.
We're going to take a very quick break. We're going to come back with some more about community development, and then key successes and failures and priorities for next year, and then things like when we think the first meeting is going to be. So if you do want to get involved with the M.R.A, what the easiest way to do that's going to be, and then we're going to say goodbye with some Christmas music in about 25 minutes or so. You're on ilovemelville.live. Participate if you like on 066 013 4229. That's on WhatsApp. On YouTube, ilovemelville.live, and it's the same thing on Facebook. My name is Johan Prince. And we're back. It's sort of the last half hour of the last show of the year. We'll be back in January of 2021, unless the Zombie Apocalypse Part 2 completely wipes us out. My name is Johan Prince. My guest tonight is Matthew Lewis. We're talking about the Melville Residents Association. There is an odd sound in the background. It sounds like the sea. And I'm not sure if I'm the only one who can hear it. Are you getting it as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does sound
hear that.
like the ocean in the background. So if you're listening to us and you're hearing that sound, our apologies. Matthew Beta is going to sort it out as quickly as is humanly possible. One of the questions we asked previously in one of the previous shows, and it sort of deals with community development, and it deals with my little bit of cynicism that popped out just before the break, is connecting with other residents associations. And whether we're cooperating with them and learning from them, talking about community development projects. Well, what are people doing, and what's worked, and what's not working, and what have they learned? You don't have the capacity at the moment to do that kind of liaison.
Not really.
On a structured, ongoing sort of a basis where information can be shared backwards and forwards, and
Not
everybody can learn.
really. Yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? So it would be great to be able to come together as you know, with Auckland Park and with Parkhurst and West Dean and Firetown and all of those areas, and be able to come together and go, okay, what are you dealing with? This is what we're dealing with. This is what's worked for you. Those would all be fantastic things to be able to do. At the moment, it is difficult for us to be able to do that for a number of reasons. We our size, our limited manpower and capacity, but also it's December of 2020. People are tired. People want to go away. People want to sleep, um, and hit the
if you were to
reset
measure
button.
grumpiness on a scale of 1 to 10, I would
Man,
break the scale.
man, it is just I said to someone today, I am counting the minutes to the end of the year right
Yeah.
now. So yeah, I think that
But just to get back to the portfolios you were talking about earlier, is that maybe another portfolio, right? Is there maybe room for someone whose job it is to do liaison,
yeah,
to create
absolutely.
a center of knowledge and sharing?
Absolutely. Um, yeah, and it probably wouldn't need to be much more complicated than just ensuring that emails are sent out and received every now and again.
Mm.
You know, possibly going to a couple of other residents association meetings now and then. Um, but yeah, it is certainly something that we would welcome anyone wanting to pick up and do. Absolutely. Um, I think that there are very many lessons that we can probably learn from the surrounding residents associations, and you know, cooperation on some things would be very welcome and very appreciated.
Because there's a question also in terms of how much duplication of skill and service and stuff you need at a specific scale of organization, right? Um, One of the things you spend a lot of time on is helping people through zoning issues,
Hmm.
or helping people through licensing issues, or helping people through um, billing issues.
Yeah,
But those are resources that don't necessarily have to be developed only on the suburb level. You could develop these resources across a couple of suburbs.
exactly. Yeah. Um, and it goes beyond that. I mean, you know, I think it would be easier in general to be able to get JMPD to listen to us, or COJ as a larger entity, or the ward councillor, for example. I mean, Melville is not the only suburb that makes up the ward that we are a part of. You know, and I, again, am a strong believer of the fact that a united voice is often a stronger voice in
Mhm.
terms of getting the big baddies and bureaucracy to listen to us. Um, so yeah, it's certainly, as I said, the goal. It's just a question of our capacity to see how quickly we can get there. Um,
So when you start talking to people who've expressed an interest in participating, you may very well find that they create new portfolios for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of been my experience with the M.R.A so far, is it's quite an organic thing. You know, it kind of can shift and mold itself depending on who is there and what the issues of the day are. Um, we are by no means adverse to people coming in saying, well, this is an interest of mine. I really want to take that and run with it. Uh, by all means, please go ahead and do that, and we will support you in every way that we possibly can. Um, so yeah, in terms of that possibly becoming another portfolio, absolutely. It would be something that we would just have to look at and see what the capacity is.
Okay. Now, again, noting that we're all done with the year and we're all really tired, um, you must have a sense of what's worked this year, what hasn't, what you wish you could have done differently, what perhaps you wish you hadn't done at all. And I know I have many of those. Um,
Yes, wake up.
yeah, and it's
That's
not just it's not just this year. It's just as you get older, there's just a longer list of
oh.
things where you go, oh, well, that was stupid. Um, and then some priorities for the next year. And setting priorities for next year is difficult because we don't know how long it's going to take for vaccines to happen and how many people are going to take them and what the rollout is going to be like, and will we have more lockdowns and what will be the economic impact of not just that but everything else that we're going through. But still, one does have to make plans.
Yes.
um, so let's start with the things that haven't gone so well this year. What have been the disappointments? What have been the things that you wish had turned out better?
So I don't know why I would be saying this, but this year is kind of difficult to base an opinion on, really. Um, no, in all seriousness, I mean, a large portion of what could be construed as the core MRA activities were pretty heavily constrained by lockdown, and not being able to actually be out there and doing stuff. So that has, there's a fairly substantial part of the year that's just kind of like a blank slate because nothing was happening. Um, my feeling as well is that the from sort of the mid-year on, from when I started becoming involved in the MRA, is that there was a fairly uh, sizable restructuring of the MRA. Maybe not a restructuring, but a changing of the guard and the personnel and all of that kind of stuff as well. Things that I would like
So
to.
is this the current MRA? Is it substantially a new team?
Well, I mean, if you look at the people who are on it, Kelsey, Dale, Derek, and Amanda have been involved in the MRA for
Well,
for for
since the
longer
Iron
than I know.
Age, since the Iron Age,
They
Melville
were
copies.
responsible for the Iron
Right.
Age deposits on Melville copies. Oh, now I really hope they're
Derek's
not
not
listening
here,
to
so
this.
he we can say whatever we like. Yeah.
um, so they've been involved for just years and years and years. Dale has been involved with the heritage portfolio also for quite a while and is exceedingly experienced in it. Um, and Kelsey has been also involved. I think that what has changed really is me,
Right.
and a certain reassignment of focuses and portfolios and everything like that, and a more definition of like who's going to pursue what in what portfolio. So I think that's really what has changed, and then also um, a a larger focus on our ability to communicate with the residents at large. So I would say that the main thing that I think if we could, have a gimme of 2020 and start on 1 January 2020, although knowing what 2020 had in store, I don't think anybody would take that decision. Um, but would be just being more visible, being more communicative, being out there, you know, when lockdown happens, sending out a mail saying, hope everyone's okay. Please get in touch if you're struggling, whatever way that might be. We are here
Mhm.
to help, all of that kind of stuff. I think it has been a blind spot of the MRA in the past that we haven't been as communicative as we should have been. And we haven't made use of the channels available to us, especially in the 21st century, that are available to us.
Just thinking, for instance, convening a meeting, getting 50 people into a meeting now is going to be a little bit easier because you don't have to have a venue.
Yeah,
You go onto the interwebs,
exactly.
which is something we've all had to learn to do over the last few months.
Exactly.
So there's some opportunities there.
Yeah, exactly. There's some opportunities there. There is, yeah. So the that's something that I hope that we are starting to put right. We sent out the survey, trying to get to know people, interact a little bit more. That's a clear thing that we can build on. Set out a time to meet, come have a coffee, let's chat. We're pursuing the M.R.A show with ILM. Um, just in an ongoing attempt to be more visible, to be a resource that residents feel they have that they can reach out to. I would very much like it to be that no matter what issue you're having as a resident in Melville, your first port of call or the first thought you have is, I should get in touch with the MRA committee,
Even if it's just for advice, even if
even
it's
if it's
just to
just for
figure out, is
advice.
there something I can do something about, and who do I need to talk to?
Yeah, even if it's, I have a great idea, I want to come and get your thoughts on it, and can I go there and go off and do it, you know and will you support me? um those are, so really we should be the kind of body that is the first port of call, no matter what it is.
Okay, because if I understand the situation correctly, your real long term risk, the biggest risk here, is that there aren't that many personnel. You need a pipeline of more people so that you can expand your ability to get stuff done, but also so that you don't have single point failures. You know, where if
Yes.
somebody moves out of Melville, then a whole portfolio disappears.
Yes.
Um, and that kind of memory can take years to rebuild,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you may not be able to rebuild it at all.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I think that is a massive risk. There's a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge that exists within the MRA committee and within the residents themselves. There are people who are not necessarily part of the core committee who nevertheless are people who you go, oh gee, I wonder who would know that. Oh, we should get in touch with
Mhm.
that person. Um, so another, important project of ours would be to develop some kind of core repository of all of this knowledge and information that can easily be handed on. I think that also it's important for us to, as an extension of keeping in touch with people, keeping in touch with the changing demographics of Melville. A suburb is not a static place where you are born here and you die here and that's it. So I think that what is important to the Melville of today is not necessarily going to be important of the Melville in 5 years from now. And in fact, I hope it's not, because if we're still sitting here talking about physical environment issues and safety and security, then we really need to look at what we're doing.
Mm.
Because if we've been trying to do that for 5 years and failing, then obviously we're doing something wrong. So it's about keeping current, keeping up to date, and making sure that that is the all of the IP that exists there now is something that's easily hand downable throughout, further on along down the way. I was also having the conversation with someone who was saying to me, you don't seem like the typical MRA committee member.
Oh yeah, there's a type.
Apparently,
Yeah.
I think I am probably regarded as being about 25 years too young to be really part of the type. But I think that that's important for us as well, as for people to realize that if you live in Melville, you have a legitimate say in what happens as part of the MRA, and we have a sizable student community here. We have a sizable young people community here, single people, young families, all the way through, of all various different creeds, colors, sexes, all the rest of it. And I think that it is really important for us that we develop an MRA that is inclusive and representative of the suburb at large. And my major appeal as we go into the holiday season would be for residents to just, you know, think about the suburb that you want and come back to us, please, and be a part of it. Because I think that that is a really important thing to really focus on.
Right. So communication, um, depth of bench
Mm,
are problems.
mm.
I'm not going to say challenges, but they're things you want to fix next year. What has gone well? I suppose the first thing to be proud of is that you're still alive. That the right
We made it.
that the organization still exists,
Yes.
and that it's able to deliver a certain range of services at a fairly high quality to residents. That's so. I'm going to take one of your key bright spots, and I'm just going to put it up front. What else do you think has gone well this year?
I think that we have I think, funnily enough, actually, one of the things that has been good for the MRA has been the lockdown. It's allowed us to take a step. I think allowed us all to take a step back and to look at what the priorities were and to go, okay, cool. So what are we trying to do here? We're not crazy. We're not running around like headless chickens. Let's take a breath and then go, okay, what is important? And I think that we came out of that lockdown period and went, okay, so these are the people that are keen, who want to be involved. These are the places that we really want to focus on. Now let's go out and do it. And I think that the result has been, I'm really pleased that we first of all got responses to the survey. You know, it was my greatest fear was we'll put this out there and get like 5 people responding, and that'll
Which
be a
would be a
terrible.
response. That would
It
be a
well, yes, it would give us a very good idea of of where we stand.
yeah.
But to get a decent amount of responses and the kind of responses we have gotten, I think gives us a very clear indication of where we need to be heading. And I think that we are making good steps forward in terms of what probably needed to be our first priority, which was being more visible and being more communicative. So I think that those have been two very good points of positivity for us in 2020. And now it's about keeping that ball rolling and taking that on to the next level. You know, engaging with the people who want to be engaged with, achieving the things that are important to residents, so that we can look back this time next year and go, "Hey, look at this! We did achieve what we said we were going to do."
And part of that communication process must also be communicating when you get stuff done, communicating when you get
Absolutely.
stuff right, because that's been a in my humble view, also one of the problems is what people will sometimes say is, well, the MRA never does anything. Um, having spoken to all of you over the last couple of weeks, that's clearly not the case. Uh, but what is the case is the MRA doesn't say when it's done something.
Yeah, our sins of communication have been manifold.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, it's as important to be to sing the praises as it is to say, "Hey, we need help here." Um, so yeah, you know, there's nothing wrong with being a bit more out there with this is what we have achieved.
Mm.
And I think as well, you know, that's going to factor a lot into being more having more face time with the residents of Melville. And as I said earlier, I'm not a big believer in the let's all call somebody into the hall down the road and get up in front of a microphone. I'm more of a believer in one of us will be available on Sunday, pop by and have a coffee, and we'll discuss things that are important to you. And I think just through that will be an important way to talk about, you know, successes, failures, and where we need to go next.
Okay, we're going to take a quick last break. We're going to come back, wrap up. My guest this evening is Matthew Lewis, who's in charge of community development for the Melville Residents Association. I'm going to see if I can find one or two more difficult questions to ask him just before we all go on holiday.
Because
You're on.
I'm clearly not sweating enough.
No, and this is fun for me. Um, you know, there's something to be said for just mild sadism.
Yeah, well,
So on YouTube, please comment if you like on ilovemelville.live, on WhatsApp 0660134229. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're live. This is not what. How does that quote go? This is not the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the
the
end of
end
the
of the
beginning.
beginning.
Yes. You're on ilovemelville.live. This is the Melville Residents Association show. It is the last one of the year 2020. We'll be back in 2021 with a revitalized community, a revitalized world, revitalized selves. We will all have recovered our hope of a better future. My name is Johan Prince. My guest tonight is Matthew Lewis. To contact, to participate, I love Melville.live on Facebook and on YouTube, or 066 013 4229. I have a very strong sense that a lot of people have already gone, or that today, tomorrow is sort of people's last days.
Mm.
I think everything switches off starting next week, which I'm personally quite looking forward to. Um, what happens just on a purely practical basis? Does the MRA essentially shut down over December, or are people still around? Is that a general plan that somebody's always around? How does it work practically?
Yeah, I mean, look, all of us are still available. Should there be a need, if you need to get in touch with any of us, we can be reached via our emails, which are available on the MRA website, or on the social media pages, or via WhatsApp groups, any of those normal channels that you would contact us on. I think that the big difference is just that we won't be meeting
Mm,
for this short period. So there won't be an executive committee sit down and gathering between now and, say, the 4th of January. But we are still active and involved. And if you have an issue, please don't feel like we are unavailable. You're not going to
you
receive
could
an
still
out
send
of
an email.
exactly. You're not going to receive an out of office reply and that says, "Well, sorry for you. Speak
Mhm.
to you in
Yes, yes,
2021."
we'll only care then.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's not going to be the case.
No.
There's an opportunity though. I also have a suspicion a lot of people are going to potentially be staying in Melville who may otherwise have in other years who may have disappeared for the wilds of the coast or the north or whatever. Um, which is going to mean a lot of people may come out of their shells a little bit and experience the suburb in different ways over this period than they would normally do,
Hmm.
and that might be fertile ground for ideas and inspiration to strike. So maybe one of the things that we should also say to people is, while you're out and about in December, and while you're irritated with the fact that in what is normally the peak tourism season, both internal and external, including also residents in Melbourne wanting to go to restaurants and bars and things, is also the very time when most of the restaurants and bars close down,
Yes.
which I found odd
Yes.
and inexplicable for many years.
Yes.
There's that completely dead period from
Yes.
just after Christmas to just sort of New Year, where it may be difficult to buy bread in
Yes.
this
I remember
in this suburb.
our first Christmas here when we rocked up at Ant expecting an Ant pizza and found out it was closed until January and were
Yes,
completely
but
baffled by the fact that Ant was closed.
yes, but like, but this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But surely, if it didn't make sense, you wouldn't do it. But wait, the world doesn't work that way. Um, so yeah, so that's something that in my personal wish would be a lot more vibrancy in December. But I suppose if restaurants are closing, it must be because there isn't sufficient business for them uh, to warrant being open.
Yeah, I would guess so. I mean, that is the assumption I've made, is that there just isn't enough people in Joburg during December to warrant staying open, especially if you're a small little place like most of the restaurants and cafes on 7th are. Um, I would suspect that that would be a little bit different this year, just because, as you say, I don't think everybody's going to be going away, and I think that a lot of businesses will take every opportunity they can get to make a little bit more turnover in what has been undoubtedly a
Mm.
tough year for turnover. Um,
And then part of that argument may be, if you've already cut overhead costs and you're already running as lean as you can, it may then give you that flexibility to stay open a little bit longer, even on lower volumes, because you're used to lower volumes now.
Yes, exactly, exactly. I would also echo and want to emphasize what you were saying about, while you're out and about, Mel, we'll give some thought to, what can we do to make it a fun and festive place, and to, um, make it exciting, and just, keep it turning over, as we go into 2021.
And again, all of the sorts of changes, the sorts of things that we can do don't have to be big things.
Mm,
It literally can be, I'm going to clean up my block, but it's nice to know that a bunch of other people are cleaning up their block. So at least at the end of the hour that I spend picking up rubbish, the entire environment is clean. So it really can be small little things like that that eventually snowball and then begin to make a much bigger difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can even be, instead of going to Seattle Coffee Company or Vita Cafe for your coffee, go to De La Creme. Instead of buying your dog food from Spar or Pick and Pay, buy it from Ziggy's.
Or at
Um,
least the Spar across the road.
or at least the Spar across the road. No, I mean, there are businesses that are part of Melville and that are very important to maintaining the vibrancy of Melville. And I think that it's important that now more than ever they need our support, and they are there to support us as well. And I think that if they're not keeping you awake at 2 a.m. in the morning because of loud thumping music, which we are on the case of as well,
Yes.
then support them. It's part of the Melville community, and it's something that we should be actively trying to maintain and grow, I think.
Well, we've gotten to the end of what has been a most extraordinarily interesting year. I am reminded there's a Voltaire book. So here I'm name dropping now.
Wow.
I've never actually read the book, but
Okay.
I've read comments about the book. And the book is Candide.
Okay.
And apparently he wrote the book because there was he was responding to a philosophy that basically said, well, the world is the way it is because this is the best possible way that the world could be, right? So all of the problems that we see in the world are because there simply wasn't another combination of things that could happen that would have been better. So we sort of need to accept the world the way it is because this is as close to perfect as can be. And Voltaire wrote the book Candide basically to absolutely mock that philosophical position. Um, and all sorts of horrible things happen to the title character, and it all sort of goes to this is very far from the best of all possible worlds. But we are still here. The zombie apocalypse has not been total. It does appear that there is a floor below which our economy isn't going to go just yet. Some businesses are still open, and the sun will come up tomorrow. And so the big question after we've had our rest now for the next couple of weeks, the big question we have to come back with an answer to is: are we going to passively accept the world just turning around us, or are we going to take an active approach to getting stuff done, even if the stuff that we get done are small little things, but which hopefully in time cumulatively have an impact?
Yeah, I think that's really the crux of the question, is how involved are we going to be in the world around us? And that really goes right back to what we were discussing at the beginning of this episode, when you gave me the binary choice of, do we just accept what we're being given by the JDA, or do we chuck it because it's not everything that we want? And I don't think that we should accept either of those choices. We have it within our power to demand more, and we deserve more as a community. And I think that if there is one major resolution for 2021 for the M.R.A, it is the resolution to demand and get more,
Even of ourselves,
even of
even of
ourselves.
each other.
Exactly.
Beachheads, landings.
And I'm going to walk out of here and get called by every single other member of the M.R.A committee going, what did you just say?
Yes, what did
What?
you commit us to? Um, but that's fine. We live in a post-truth world. We can always just make up a
I'd never
different
said
story.
anything. I
Exactly.
didn't say that.
There's no proof whatsoever.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to everybody who's joined us, not just for this episode, but for the previous episodes. I think we'll come back and do this again next year. We may have some rejigging of formats, but I think this is a valuable platform for the community over time to begin to talk to itself, and that's fundamentally where community comes from. Is people engaging. People sitting behind walls and closed doors are not a community. They're a there's another word for that, which will come to me in a second. Thank you to all of the executive members of the Melville Residents Association who have so kindly donated their time, not just to the M.R.A, but also to this program to give us a sense of what's happening and how we can all contribute. Thank you also to the people who have technically made it happen, including Tato Malindi, this evening, Matthew Beta, who's been with us for the last couple of weeks, making sure that everything goes out crisp and clear, and who is also responsible for the track of levity and joy with which we're about to play out. I just want to make absolutely sure that, oh, and Safisa Mfelang, who's been responsible for all of the logistical planning around all of this, because I can't be trusted to do a single thing.
Yeah, I think it might be down to Safiso almost entirely that this goes out at all.
No, if it wasn't for Safiso
So
or Matthew, none of this would happen. I thank you all very much. I wish you the absolute best for the festive season. May there's the old Irish wish, may the road rise up to meet you, and may the best of your past be the worst of your future. And if those two things can be true, we'll have a good year next year. Thank you very much. Have a good one. We'll see you in January. He found me White Christmas.
are we?
Wait.